We got a negative review, by the way, that there's too much bickering on this podcast. So,
Oh yeah,
watch it. Yeah.
why didn't you share that with me?
Oh, it's on Apple Podcasts review.
Oh, did they single out anybody as being divisive, like the AI called me divisive?
No, a previous one. Did you see the one that called you the Troy bot needs to stop interrupting? I wrote that one. Welcome to People vs. Algorithms, where we connect the dots between media, technology, and culture. Normally, we are joined by Alex Schleifer and Troy Young, but I'm using the royal we, me and the audience. But this week, again, Alex has some kind of conflict. He's at a conference, is it?
I don't keep track of Alex.
Okay, he's at a conference. I can't imagine Alex at a conference. But I've never met him in person. I told someone this last night and they didn't believe me. And it's true.
You can't imagine him at a conference? Why? Because
I don't know
he's
why.
Sort of cave dweller?
No, I don't know. It's hard
Maybe
for me.
It's like Comic-Con or something.
I don't know. Having been to a lot of like conferences in my day, I don't know. Alex
the beard
doesn't seem
and the toque?
He doesn't seem like a conference type. He doesn't seem like a guy who would put the lanyard on. But maybe, I mean, it's reassuring to me as a person who is a webinar provider that, Alex also does the conference circuit. I want to talk about this like packaged media and how they deal with free radicals. You used this term free radicals the other week, and I really liked it because I've been like thinking of them as like troublemakers, but that's too negative. And I think free radicals is a nice branding touch, because what I meant by it is within every organization, you're going to have people that line up, and you don't have to worry about it. But anyone who is running these organizations, you're gonna have the people who don't stay in line, and they're gonna.
I liked them. I liked having a few until they went, over the edge. But I liked having free radicals in my.
Yeah, it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
But what I wonder is if what I'm trying to brand packaged media can keep the free radicals, because because they don't necessarily fit within there, and now they have like a lot of options. Taylor Lorenz to me is a lot of people. She's a lightning rod, and that's a great thing to be these days. I really admire Taylor for that. And she just left the Washington Post, where she was a technology columnist. And prior to that, she was a technology reporter at the New York Times. She has been a technology reporter at the Atlantic, and before that, at the Daily Beast. This is all since 2017. And also shout out to the Daily Beast, which has incubated a lot of really great talent over the last decade or so. I think that's an underappreciated thing. But Taylor, she penned her inevitable, I'm going to Substack, which I'm shocked that it hasn't happened before. This is not the most surprising thing, because I don't know, like she's always involved herself in like controversies, either through her own means or just because there's a lot of people out there on the internet who I guess she rubs the wrong way. But one of the things that Taylor wrote, and she focuses on internet culture, and I give her a ton of credit for taking this area seriously and before other people did. And she's been doing it for a long time. And I would always use her as an example with our younger or less experienced, I should say, staffers, about how going narrow and deep makes you really valuable in the marketplace. So she's going off to Substack. She started her own publication there called User Magazine. And in her departure, she torches old school institutions. She said, legacy media has tried desperately to position itself as a credible source for news about online culture. But many of these institutions, for all their power and prestige, have proven themselves fundamentally unprepared to navigate today's chaotic, contentious, fast-paced, and highly nuanced online media landscape. And I think she has a bit of a point. Substack we've gone past the 2021 sort of era of, is Substack coming for the New York Times? No, it's not, right? But it's interesting that there's still this drip of legacy media, packaged media, whatever you want to call it, losing free radicals. What do you think, Troy?
So I think for someone like Taylor, it's probably a good idea And I think broadly what Substack shows is that, and it really had to do with the transition from ad-supported to paid media and other monetization alternatives, which meant that if someone created a platform, there were platforms before, there were plenty of blogging platforms, and there's plenty of social media platforms, and there was, Tumblr and all the places where you could make content and, distribute it. But we then hit the kind of subscription era where you could start to see that, like Matt Iglesias, who's got, I don't know what they say today, 18,000 paying subscribers at $80 per a year, that there's a, really good living to be made as an independent, and it's admittedly for the few. But basically, Substack drove out all the cost and complexity of being a free radical, of being an independent. And, there's no, I got to deal with advertising nonsense. There's no, CMS nonsense. At the same time, we decided to basically abandon the complexity of page-based web publishing and just go like to simplified formats, mostly connected to an email. And so it sort of showed a different way. But I would extend that, because I'll share this little anecdote. I was having lunch with a person that's a sort of investigative reporter, like kind of, I don't know, late mid-career, senior on the weekend. And she said, Troy, she's a big fan of the podcast, by the way. She said, how much time do you think I've got? And she's like, I don't want another job. Like, how much time do I got? And I sort of like knee-jerk, replied. I said, I don't know, 5 years. And I said, maybe you need to start a side hustle soon. We started a discussion and agreed pretty quickly that even in the AI world, we still need reporting, which is what she does, right? You need someone that can wade through the complexity of the world and pull out the important stuff and use your eyes and ears and your judgment and all of that. And, AI is no good at that. I mean, at least not yet, right? Like it's so reporting's really important. And then just to kind of extend the story, then I was like, well, let's create a construct of like what I refer to or think of as above the line and below the line. Above the line is shit that AI can't do or that you should be investing in. And below the line is all the parts of media that impacted massively by AI, should be replaced, should be automated, all of that stuff, right?
I like this.
Yeah. And so I was just like, let's start to separate, because if like we're clearly going through, this isn't just like a Google platform shift, this is a media platform shift that we're going through. And then you send me that thing on the text thread, which is like, dude, Jason Silva, doing like sort of philosophical jazz with ChatGPT. That thing from Twitter that you sent? Do you remember what
I didn't say? I think
about?
that was Alex. That sounds
Yeah,
very Alex.
I mean,
Why was he on Twitter?
Oh, Alex jumps in now and again.
Anyway,
there's this guy having this incredibly dense, conceptual, almost mystical, kind of spiritual conversation with the AI. And it's like a real, kind of wonderful back and forth. And like, this is like singularity shit. Like, you're seeing an ability to navigate, even if it is just pattern matching in an intense amount of, against an intense amount of processing, it looks like natural connection making, insightful, instinctual intelligence, right? Like that's what it looks, and sort of asymptotically, we're clearly approaching something that is human-like. But we still need reporting. We still need, humanness. We still need humor. So you sent me that, and then I was looking at one last kind of data point, which was the OpenAI Dev Day. And that was like, I think a couple days ago. And they were showing, now they have a new, what's called the real-time API. And they were showing the real-time API against other API calls. So a conversation about being in a city, going from place to place with the AI in real time, but also connected to a map API. And showing like real time, like images and then links to other places. And then in the end, they actually asked in a funny little kind of demo, they asked GPT to find a place to get treats for the developers in the audience, and it literally made a phone call to order a bunch of chocolate strawberries.
Okay, so that's the agent sort of.
Yeah, so
flip.
you're seeing this sort of agentic future, right?
Agentic,
And
I like that.
so, media going to change a ton. And so in my mind, like the web model of pages and links is going to feel very old very quickly. Now, we've talked about this for 2 episodes, right? So, and AI is kind of retraining us to expect something easier and more helpful and less frictiony and all that. And once again, publishers are going to straddle 2 worlds, just as they did bridging sort of print broadcast worlds to digital on-demand worlds. And you can't abandon one in favor of the new. Those are the trade-offs that we always talk about, right? And the nimble innovators will be better off, blah, 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 blah. But I sort of think that you then have to go and you got to say, well, what's above the line and what's below the line? And I've been doing that exercise.
So wait, is the line just survivability?
The line is stuff to, I guess, I mean, this is a new thought, so maybe you can help me with it. But I was thinking that the line was the stuff that humans do uniquely well in media. And then below the line was stuff that gets automated or is done better by AI. And so I made a list.
Give me 5 things that are above the line and a few things.
Well, obviously, like I said, real sourced reporting, right? Probably augmented by your little AI helper, but real reporting, original, informed, thoughtful point of view. This is what I think. Yeah. This is what my experience is.
Reported analysis is going nowhere. Tim Kawakami, this really good sports columnist, he just left The Athletic, and he torched The Athletic too for being a bureaucratic mess and losing its way. But he's just went over to SF Standard, and I think he's totally right on that.
So humanness, personality, right? AKA talent, right? Like what we think of in the biz as talent. Humor. AI isn't funny. I mean, at least I haven't found it to be funny. It's, it's weird, sanctimonious. It's
bootlickers too.
Yeah.
It's always telling me.
I got more. I mean, recommendations provided by trusted brands or qualified humans, right? The best, I don't know, SUV for XYZ according to someone you trust or someone that you know. I think that's important. At some point, quality of information.
I think that straddles above and below the line.
Okay, so that's a straddler. We'll call that a straddler. And then I think your data, your unique functional offering connected with AI, right? Like, how do you think about, this is the hardest question. So we have these aggregators, right? Like Google was an aggregator, Facebook's an aggregator, Instagram's an aggregator, TikTok's an aggregator, whatever. And media has been slaughtered by aggregators, right? Because they create better interfaces for information and they create more ways for more people to put more content into a system.
Oh, and also they don't pay for the actual creation of it.
And that's a benefit too, right?
You take out all the costs of actually making the shit. Yeah.
So
business looks better.
If you want to, you're going to say, someone in your tech group or your product group is going to say, we'll just do our own AI interface on our CMS. And why would you use that? If you're why would I go to a web page to use that unless the data set was super, proprietary and useful and unique? And it really was worth my time because the kind of generalist or horizontal models are getting so good at doing everything. Right?
I don't know. I might part ways with you there. I really think that there's an opportunity. Did you see Politico is doing this deal?
Right,
with
but that's
AI?
That supports my case because they have their a unique data set augmented by AI, right?
Right. Okay, so yeah, the middle gets slaughtered no matter what. For instance, I think with this, Alex uploaded all of the podcast episodes to Notebook LM. I think there's actual value. I don't know how much the value is, but I think there's value to be created if people could have a natural query with the insights that particularly you have shared during this podcast. I think that there's actual value to be created there for sure. What I'm surprised at is that I did a dinner last night with a bunch of publishing executives, and I just asked, what are people doing what are you doing with AI? Give me a business use case, just anything, small, medium, very little.
Right.
They're either not sharing it or they're just not doing it. And I think the real danger is that this just becomes another game of defense. And I get it. These businesses are difficult to make work. But you got to kind of get beyond the defense, get on to the efficiency. I did this little schematic.
You started to talk like a consultant. It's nice.
Oh yeah, I did a little schematic too. It reminded me of that consulting
napkin
project we did.
sketch. Yeah.
No, it was like Kubler-Ross like stages, but it was like denial, and then you get into.
Did you
bargaining.
project this? You projected it with a projector?
No, I didn't project it. It was in a newsletter. And you can also, everyone can like see this, but you're going to see the explanation. You need to subscribe to TRB Pro.
Shit, I got to remember to cancel my subscription.
Please don't. Anyway, but you go into the efficiency, and I think that's where this stuff is going to start, right? But you have to get beyond just efficiency.
Well, that's what I would bring this back to. Okay, so to bring it back to the Taylor thing, way too much money in what we would call digital media or publishing, whatever you want to call it, is spent on the enablement of the content. Like 60, 70% ad sales, operations, all the things you do to make the content.
Oh, by the way, within the editorial, there's a ton of money that goes to that. To me, you remember like we were talking above the line, below the line, working.
Well, we
media.
haven't finished yet.
Okay, sorry. Go on. I'm just eager.
Well, let's go below the line now. What do you say? Because this is where it starts.
Okay.
If you're going to compete for talent, like in the case of WAPO and Taylor Lorenz versus Substack, you need to be more efficient, more tolerant. You have to give people more room. You have to pay them more. I mean, you have to pay talent more, like real talent, right? And let's assume that Taylor is that. So what you have to do, I mean, I think below the line means take all laborious cost, expensive processes and use and automate them. Right. And so like in particular, ad tech or anything and not even ad tech.
You've really turned on ad tech lately.
It's not just ad tech, dude.
What is it?
There's usually 3 people for every salesperson in a media company. Okay.
Oh, I know.
And those are the people that package up grids and do the strategy and make the decks that get thrown in the garbage. It's a complete waste of time. And by the way, the scaled providers and the platforms, they don't do any of that shit. Right? Just the little tiny companies that take the sub 15% of the revenue against the platforms, pitch and pitch and pitch and make decks and do the dining and do all the stuff. Right? So that needs to get more efficient, or you can't compete with the efficient mechanism that the marketplace is giving independent talent. But let's keep going, okay? Below the line, right? So obviously, historical or evergreen content below the line, right?
Library content.
Well, it's more than that. And I want to make this point because the philosophical conversation, the Carl Sagan conversation that Jason Silva had with the AI, I mean, that was like all knowledge that existed before this moment in a book, in a conversation, in a movie. Like the AI swept all of that up. So it's like my friend Chris Kimball will say to me, well, it won't automate my recipes. I'm like, Chris, maybe it will. If I want to make carbonara, I know you make it really well, like you're really good at it and you got your own little Milk Street twist on it, but there's like access to a carbonara recipe in 2 seconds with ChatGPT, and then to query it if you really wanted it to make it because you had one ingredient and not another. Like it's kind of
that's tricky. What I like. That's what I like about. I use Perplexity for recipes.
For recipes, right? So history, geography, physics, chemistry, recipes, you name it. Unless you can convince me that you are a very, very specific recipe that is very, very special, right? It just gets harder. It's not impossible, but it's harder. But stick with me. Here's what I've been finding lately. So I was in a car dealership, and it was aggravating as always.
Why are you going to a car dealership?
I just want to get another car. My car.
I've never bought a car, and I'm like scared about the process.
Yeah. Well, so what I found is that the nice salesperson was just annoying because ChatGPT was like 100 times better. Because if I wanted to compare the trim levels on 2 models, like it literally just spit the answer back to me in 2 seconds.
But he or she is there to negotiate. They're going to throw.
No, there's no negotiation in this kind of dealership.
Air fresheners.
No, there's no. There's a price. You pay the price.
Really?
Yeah. So here's what I'm finding. Much of what I would call new knowledge content, stuff that's current or new, will fall below the line, and we don't like to admit that. So what that means is, and by the way, with little economic recompense, like the stuff that is Like the demo that they showed at the OpenAI Dev Day was like, oh, we're hungry. Where should we eat in? I don't know, whatever city they were in, San Francisco or Los Angeles. And it said, try this restaurant and this restaurant and this restaurant. And so those are current pieces of content, right? And you would like to think that I can still put those on my eater site and differentiate. But increasingly, everybody's doing deals with the aggregators. Increasingly, people will feed the aggregators for free. And aggregators, I mean the new interfaces, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever. And they're closing the gap between evergreen and new. They're closing the gap, dude. You just use it every day and you'll see that the gap is being closed. So unwittingly or not, content creators of all stripes feed models with the best restaurants in Lisbon. You know, and by the way, that information changes, but not that much. Listen, travel content on AI, killer use case. Yeah, I've done it. I've done it. Not only is it a killer use case before you go, it's a killer use case while you're there. I was in Paris taking pictures of monuments with ChatGPT, and it would just explain it to me. Like, I don't need Lonely Planet.
You know what a lot of people are using, and I don't know how this plays into your above the line and below the line, but with travel content and that, is Google Docs. A shared Google Doc is like the new hottest app for finding things to do in cities because it's human recommended. So like I know this, like,
well, you're
Colin
not building
Nagy,
a media company off that. I'm sorry.
No. That's what I mean. Because everything has become optimized to the point of absurdity, and because everyone gets the same recommendations, if you're going to find the deep cuts in Tokyo, you're going to get Colin Nagy's Google Doc
for free. But what I was trying to do there is kind of show you that it's not just evergreen. It's kind of like evergreen plus new stuff. And so as media, your ability to justify web-based friction in exchange for moderately valuable new content will be modest. It just will be. Because friction crushes most things. And if I'm using the chatbot, but you're like, come over to my webpage and get something from me, it's getting harder. So that's a below the line item for me. Here's another below the line item, curation. Curation's not useful anymore, right? AI can curate 1 million times better than humans. Not only can it curate, but it can also provide the next step, which is to present information in the way you like it. Long, short, bulleted, summarized text, audio. We're seeing it, right? I want my news read in the voice of William Shatner. Like, great. Alex wants his read in bullet points by Snoop Dogg. So like the packaging and curation of information is becoming a below the line item because it's so good at personalizing for you.
Define curation.
Here's things that you should read today because they're hot, or because you like them, or because you're interested in this topic, or this is your passion, or, the most topical things of the moment. Like, I mean, of course, everything has a human kind of like boutique angle, right? Like, oh, I get my album recommendations from the like How Long Gone guys because they're, tastemakers. Sure. Okay, great. But this isn't media, man. This is like little tiny businesses. This is boutique. This is boutique shit.
I mean, I do think that there is a lane for packaged media curation, right? Like,
Maybe.
I mean, The Economist's point of view is never surprising, as I say, but like there's still value in that. And there's influence and power in their curation of what is going on in the world. That is,
but The Economist is a reporting organization with a brand, so I think that's useful for sure. That makes sense to me, right? Like the other thing is that below the line, what I would call the AI, the context engine. So any piece of original content can be infinitely contextualized with AI. Remake it, augment it, add a timeline, show precedents, add imagery, connect to locations, all of that. AI is so good at taking a piece of knowledge and just making it more useful.
Well, you know what it's also really good at is, we've talked about it before, about the versioning, right? And I think what it's going to be, what I believe a lot of publishers are going to be using this is to take the content and create new forms of content off of it. And you already see it with like Substack and their, the AI, creating a podcast. Yeah, right now it's not perfect. It gets a couple things wrong, Notebook LM and whatnot. That's fine, right? It's going to get better. You're always trying to guess. It's like, should it be this format? Should it be that format? It's like, no, it's going to be like every format. You're going to be able to just version it out in so many different ways. I think the challenge ends up being everyone is going to have access to these tools. And I'm not sure how you create leverage at all as a media organization in that kind of ecosystem.
Let's list it out. I think it's a little bit back to your economist example, which is your brand connotes trust, your format and your reporting is useful and incremental to what could be done by automating retrieval of information. And I think that what will be demanded of those organizations is that they're hyper efficient. So more and more of the revenue can go back to seasoned senior talent that exhibit the characteristics of being human, having strong, clear, valuable point of view, personality, humor, whatever it is, and their ability, obviously, to do deep reporting and be experts. Frankly, it's just that they're experts. And
but I have a question then. Why would that talent want to be part of one of these organizations?
Because if Taylor existed inside of a different construct in the Washington Post and there was less bullshit and more money, she would stay there.
I think that's the interesting thing of our friends at Puck is that they're trying to thread that needle. And I think every publisher is going to have to figure out where they're going to lie on that continuum, and they're going to have to give. I think that there was like a lull with the sort of Substack wave, but this isn't sort of going away. And the problem, quote unquote, problem of it is the most talented and arguably most valuable people are going to be the ones who end up taking this path because it's it makes sense.
I think it's dangerous, and I really think it's yet another reason for folks. And by the way, I think it's a tremendously exciting time to be a media entrepreneur because we're going through this massive platform shift, but like nothing is sacred. And it all starts with human behavior. Much more of the spectrum is going to be aggregated, processed, and kind of recombobulated by AI. B, talent is going to platforms where they eat what they kill. And I would say that on the consumer front, I found, like my wife said the other day, she's like, I don't spend that much time on Substack. And our friend Jane Pratt had announced this week that she was going to take her joint to Substack.
Yeah, I was excited by that. I'm glad she went with Substack.
Yeah, and you resistant. And I, I got her to talk to you, I think, right? Didn't I?
Yeah, I'm taking credit.
I love
Jane.
Jane.
If you're listening, I'm taking credit to everyone.
And I was like, Jane, just stop talking about building like a big website and getting all this funding and all this. Just go write content, make content, get some people to make content, go to Substack.
Yeah, it's a perfect minimally viable product for me.
Yeah, right. And so she's doing that. And my wife wanted to read it. And she's like, I kind of love Substack. Like she was sort of it was the first time she got the app and started seeing, all the, I'm like, don't subscribe to too many. I subscribe to a lot of them and you can use mine.
Yeah. Well, that's
the subscription thing is out of control in this house. Out of control.
Well, good. You should give it back.
That's why I got to cancel rebooting. It's like, it's too much.
Oh God. Casey Newton had his 4-year anniversary. My actually 4 years coming up next week. It's been 4 years.
Wow, time flies.
I know. So I'm going to do a subscription offer. So you can renew at like a 20% discount. I don't discount a lot, but for a week, you'll be able to get 20% off. But I think what Casey was saying, which was kind of interesting, is he left Substack over the Nazis. And, he was very honest about the trade-offs to that. And, what he found is basically people don't convert as much on these other, whether you just have a memberful, or I don't know exactly what setup he's on. I think he's on Ghost. But a lot of it is just like they've got the credit card on there and that's going to be their lock-in. They're going to have incrementally. Sure. It's so much easier to just add an extra one to the account Look, ultimately, everyone who asks me about Ghost versus Substack versus Beehive or whatever, you have to make a decision if you're going to build a business on a platform or if you're going to build a platform around a business, right? Because you can take the latter half. You have more independence. Substack is a platform through and through now, same as YouTube, et cetera. You're going to be at, I don't care about the niceties that they're saying. They've got a ton of money from Andreessen that they have to return. And you're going to be at their mercy. And there's a lot of upsides, but there's absolutely downsides if you want to take a truly independent path. But I think those are the binary decisions people have to make. And most people, it makes 98% of the cases, I think it makes sense to be on Substack or Beehive or one of these platforms rather than build a whole website. I saw The Verge.
Well, that relates to that question that you had from a reader, which is like, how do you prioritize what you do as a media company, right?
Yeah, because this was, I'll redact the publication. I didn't ask them. But what they were saying was that, it's a lament you hear from a lot of people in publishing. They're like, we're doing like 14 different things now to make money. And then we're also trying to focus. It's like something has to give and you can't be good at everything. And, they were like, of course we're not doing, 5 of these things well at all, but we kind of have to do all of these things. And oh, by the way, the organization can't add resources to do these things. And that's why I think the AI for efficiency is just like inevitable. And every publisher has to figure out how, the doing more with less is it's obvious, right? And so you have to figure out how to get leverage in these models. But I think that's a difficult one to square is how do you figure out, where you're going to win without putting too many, you want to have enough bets, but you can't have too many bets.
Right. And then, adding to that complexity, almost every publishing business, save for the sort of new upstarts, find themselves with a foot in the past and a foot in the future. It's just the nature of it.
Yeah, like that's why I think this is a great time to be a media entrepreneur. We still publish a magazine,
and now we also do digital. But digital, we can't stop doing digital, but we have to do social. And we not only have to do social, but we have to do video. And wait, now we have to do AI and we have to do newsletters. And oh yeah, we have to do affiliate or we're not going to be able to pay the bills. There's sprawl. It's a really good question. It starts with obviously like courage, but you gotta look at the kind of meta environment or the kind of big picture environment and say, what's above the line and what's below the line? Where can we possibly differentiate, create uniqueness, create value over the long term against a media brand? And where can't we? How do we be ruthlessly efficient? And in media, there's no long term. There just isn't. So anything that's like new initiative has to get to revenue, pretty fucking quickly, or, it's never like, it's not like you're going to build a new wallpaper app, or maybe you will, but if you're in media, but you likely aren't going to. And so you're going to be, stuck in that kind of short-term mindset just by necessity in the nature of the business, I think.
I was talking with another, like a lifestyle publisher, they were talking about their TikTok strategy, quote unquote. I have no idea why they were there. They're like, we have to be there. We feel like we have to be there. And it's completely all about, individuals, not like brands, but we have to be there. And I think that is I don't know if that's a relic of the past, but that's a really difficult position to be in at a time of obviously scarce resources and the need to focus on what's working and leave aside the stuff that's not working. By the way, also, being forward looking and trying to be innovative and all the rest of that. It's just it's difficult to operate, I feel like. And like you're saying, there's so many advantages to having a blank sheet in these kinds of times. We saw it with the transition to the internet.
Yeah, it's kind of like the folks that have the blank sheet can get really good at one medium and from there create. I think that's probably one of the most important answers. It's tough when you got to pay bills and you feel like you got to have your fingers in everything. But really, we're in the sort of IP era of media, which means that your ability to distinguish yourself across platforms and have something that's uniquely yours is everything. And so, I mean, the All In guys did a podcast. That's it. They did a podcast.
But it's now a lot more.
Well, it isn't, right? But it kind of flew. They didn't have to publish. They didn't have to make media every day. They didn't have to balance the needs of advertisers and subscribers. They made a podcast. And then they were able to turn that into an event.
I mean, it's hard to tell with subscribers these days, but they've got 672,000 subscribers on YouTube now, getting over 1 million views on several of these videos, which is pretty,
And getting real money for a ticket to an event.
Yeah. So all credit to them. Well done. It's funny. There was a bit of a throwback. Yeah, I miss the days when publications would sort of brag about their new redesign of their websites. I always liked those.
What the hell was that? What, we should care that TechCrunch got a new homepage?
Yes.
Who cares?
I mean, well, it was like
not only that, it's got a menu that sticks at the top. That
I know. Well, take it up with Dan. Code and Theory did it. Actually, it took 2 design shops, which is never a good sign. But I believe Code and Theory was definitely one of them.
To me, the most important thing if you redesign your homepage is get the body copy right, so it's easy to read. And I'm not sure they got that right.
Make the logo bigger and just make sure there's a sticky nav, and then call it a day.
Brian, I did this thing one time.
Oh, by the way, they also clearly added the ads at the last minute, which is always a pet peeve of mine of design.
Anyway, we're cheering for them. I mean, God, that brand's lasted forever, and
I know
remained. After Arrington, it kind of went on to live its own life, and it's still important. And God bless them, it's owned by Yahoo, and I'm cheering for Yahoo. So go. Yeah,
I mean, it's an original Web 2 survivor media brand. I mean, Mashable, that got sent off to the factory, the glue factory.
Mashable's owned by Ziff Davis, right? You want to call Vivek's shop a glue factory? You won't like that. Look, I don't know. I have not been to Mashable in a little while. It's a little bit different than where it started, right? I mean, it's a long way. It's not a distinguished editorial brand anymore. The Pete Cashmore days of Grumpy Cat at South by Southwest. But they've basically faded from. Look, there's every brand, every person goes on to a different phase of their existence. I once did this sort of naive exploration into why people read or watch content. And I wanted to break it down into the buckets, as a sort of helpful guide to think about what actually motivates someone to do anything, to watch content. And we know the basics, right? We know, because this will lead to a news item of the day that I think is actually important and interesting. And, we know the basics, your passions are addictive, right? The question was, what makes content addictive? Yeah. If I'm looking for a car or a pair of speakers or whatever, I go deep, I go hard, I'm very motivated, whatever. If I'm interested in a topic, whatever, AI, I go hard at it. So that, passions, interests, those vertical categories, super addictive, right? The new. Remember Robbie Myers from Elle Magazine? I said, Robbie, what makes content addictive? She said, it's the new, the latest. Yeah. Right. The thing that nobody has seen before. I thought it was a great answer. And then I kept sort of investigating, and there's FOMO is a great one, right? That's addictive, right? Or I think that there's, sort of the car crash allure, right? Which is the misery of others is a very addictive, that's the daily, get to the mother, the daily meet, the daily beast, or daily mail thing, right? And then ultimately social media taught us that really the most addictive thing is you and your network, right? So it became content about the people and about you are, people are interested in their own little world and themselves in particular. So the answer, probably more than anything else, is what makes content addictive is you. And so back to the headlines at the bottom of Meta, after they did the AR VR demo day, they said that they were going to start inserting AI content into your feed on a test basis. And they were careful to say it was a test in Instagram. Now, what that means is you could be scrolling Instagram and you could see a generative photograph of Brian Morsey jumping out of a birthday cake, or wearing a pumpkin costume or whatever, like taking your friends, your network, your image, and automatically creating content around that that's synthetic and pushing it back into you in the feed. I mean, how dystopian on some
Gross.
level. It's like
Kevin
now we're,
Systrom is on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean, just like sick to his stomach.
well, now my Instagram feed's going to get filled before someone outside of Meta generates content and tries to jam it into the feed with robots. Meta's going to do it for you, and they're going to have more data than anyone else, and they're going to make you even more irresistible, put you in a Speedo in the Mediterranean and put it in your feed.
With the Speedo. But like, this is a good example of how everything moves on to a different phase of life. I mean, this is a more positive sort of phase. They started Instagram to celebrate like photography, and there was a big art feel. Everyone can be like creative with the lenses and whatnot. And, they did a tremendous job at that. I mean, when they started advertising, the system would like approve every ad. And now it's on to a different phase of its existence. And they're jamming AI into
it also, if you want to look this up, there's a guy that was an engineer at Meta that in the last couple of weeks has released something called social AI, which is basically shows a synthetic social interface to AI, which is, imagine Twitter, but everybody that responds to your tweets is a robot. So you set it up and you say, I want to be followed and commented on by people of, this kind of predisposition or whatever, like angry people, cynical people, nice people, helpful people. And it's all of these sort of different characters. And you tweet away and they respond to you and you get into conversation with a synthetic social network. It's called social AI. And his point is this is sort of what the world's becoming. And this is just a different interface to AI where a lot of different points of view, because the one of the knocks on AI in particular is there's one answer. You ask ChatGPT, gives you one answer. And so this is the idea, is that you can get different perspectives and you can engage in a conversation back and forth, even if they're all automated. And
well, they're synthetic. They're not automated, right?
Yeah. Anyway, it's a freaky world, dude. And that's where we are.
Freaky world, dude. That could be a good title for this episode. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely coming. I don't know if people want that, but we will see. It's up to the people, you, to decide whether you want this synthetic life. I guess it's going to be appealing to some. It sounds
you got a good product.
I thought it was going to be bullshitting.
I mean, that's what I got this week, but I didn't know that you were going to give it away without the
Okay, do you have a good product, Troy?
Two little stories. One is, this kid called me one time and he told me he was going to do a media roll up and that he was raising capital and he could bring together in a kind of recurrent type way a bunch of different media properties and get the economies and all.
Is it Brian Goldberg?
No. And I said, you're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. But what I didn't do is I wasn't my usual, like I wasn't dismissive as much as I could be when I was a lesser person. And I got to know the person, and I still say this to him to this day, that he was like an extremely good bullshitter. And I actually invested in his company after that, and it's been a great relationship. So I'm really
so
happy
define a bullshit to define.
Well, but this isn't the story. I'll get to the bullshitter part. One of my favorite bullshitters, and one that I admire actually, and I think that his bullshitting is borderline manifesting, is Shane Smith. And this week, I mean, I listened to it today. It was delightful to hear Shane go on for 2 hours and tell his story to Rick Rubin on the Tetragrammaton podcast.
Oh my God! There's a 2-hour podcast of Shane Smith and Rick Rubin.
Yeah. And so I've heard many of the stories over the years, like having dinner with Shane or chit-chatting with Shane or whatever. And I think he's a remarkable person who's had, if life is defined by experiences, he's had a lot of them. And like some of them are really amazing. And I'm kind of jealous. Like going to North Korea is an amazing thing to do. And I remember Shane and Vice Media because I worked at the Montreal Mirror. Vice Media was across the street from us. It used to be called the Voice of Montreal. They dropped the O and it just became Vice. And it was like funded by like the, I don't know, the government. They took grants or whatever. And they were just crazy nutty punk rock kids and they built this great thing. And along the way, they invented or iterated on a type of journalism. They became the envy of the industry. They bought a cable network. They made a lot. They won a lot of Emmys. They made a lot of great content, and they fucked it all up and got eaten by private equity, and did all the other things that were bad.
It's a perfect millennial story. It's a great
story. It's a great story, and I admire him so much because along the way he used his great skills of bullshitting to manifest a company and to sell a lot of advertising and to get a lot of people to believe, a lot of really smart people to believe.
He got Rupert Murdoch to come to Williamsburg.
He got Bob Iger to believe, I mean, he's an incredible guy.
So, but what makes someone a good bullshitter, I guess? That's my point.
Shamelessness, I guess.
That helps.
Optimism, being able to think in the moment, to dance, creativity and imagination, and the realization that truth isn't an objective thing and truth is necessarily backward looking. And
you know what I think it is? I think it's just recognizing that I'm stealing this a little bit from Jeff Bezos, but that people are not truth-seeking animals. They don't want the truth, really. I mean,
I don't even understand.
They want confidence. They want you to tell them. Like, I think that's what I've learned with like a little bit because bullshitting is part of sales. I will say.
I don't know. Like it's like the Channel 5 thing that really is is a legacy media brand from the ground that Vice tilled for sure on YouTube, Channel 5, that Andrew guy. But like Shane makes the point that there was a time in kind of traditional structured media distribution control where someone would be, posted to Iran and would stay in their hotel room and would report back to the anchor and the anchor would read it. And that was the truth. Right. And they went in to Afghanistan and they this is the Vice kids. And they turned on the camera and they, started recording a different version of the world. And that, now we don't really quite know who to believe. And like last night on the debate, I would say, and now I'm all over the place, but like Vance is an extraordinary bullshitter. He's a better bullshitter than Walz is. Yeah. And so, bullshitters are valuable.
Well, Trump's a classic bullshitter.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't think good product bullshitter. It's not a bad one. I mean, I've had better. I had a really good apple today. I'm into apples right now, but
I know I like the bullshitter one because I think it is like, like Adam Newman he's back with WeWork, which
grade A bullshitter.
He's a perfect bullshitter. He's running the same playbook, which is hilarious because like, as we discussed, everyone has one playbook and they just keep running. Very few people have more than one playbook. And so he's just going to redo WeWork. And the guy's still a great bullshitter.
I want to bullshit better. I want to be better at it. Sometimes I don't let myself bullshit. I used to do this thing where I would get bored. One of my great weaknesses is that I get bored talking to people. And what it means is I can be seen as less than sort of like I move around. I can just like, I go kind of discontinuous. And I've been at parties with my wife. And once she's caught me a couple times doing it where someone comes up to you in a very American fashion. They're like, what do you do? And I would be like, oh my God. And I would say, well, I'm an emergency room surgeon because I think that would be a great job. And because it's just like, you're in it, right? Like it's kind of like, like ultimate in intensity. And my wife walks up behind me and she's like, well, what the fuck are you doing? You're like, you told them you were an emergency room surgeon. I was like, I was just playing around. And so she shamed me and I moved on, but that's just lying. That's not that. I guess that's.
Well, I think that's what. So I think bullshitting because of Theranos and a lot of other things and Madoff, even it got like tied up into fraud. And I think bullshitting is
I
on the
wasn't
other
about to
side
cut
of
someone
fraud.
open, Brian, but
Right.
you know,
But
in this case, I was just kind of being playful.
I mean, people like bullshitters, you
Yeah,
know?
they're fun. They're fun.
And I think I'm reading this book that was recommended by another PVA listener, Lucia Moses, Why Buddhism is True. It's all
She
about how we
texted me
create
this
these
week. I love
illusions.
Lucia. She's a nice person.
Yeah. About how we create all these like illusions in our minds. And that's kind of the part about Buddhism that I found was kind of interesting. But I think bullshitting is like kind of similar. It's we kind of want the illusion to some degree.
People like you, I would I'm not very good at it.
You
I don't
think I'm a good bullshitter?
No, not at all.
I know.
No, I mean, instead of building up this incredible media company that you've created, you talk about webinars. Like that's the opposite of bullshit. You know,
It's like negging. It's like self-negging.
Yeah.
It's a strategy.
Right.
All right.
All right.
I'm bummed, Alex. Is he doing like an Austrian goodbye? I appreciate that he's busy with this.
What you need to realize about Alex is that when you add a lot of complexity to his schedule, he's like, I'm out.
Yeah, me too.
I gotta go. I got a dinner. Talk to you later.
Dinner. It's like 4:30. All right. See you.